Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, welcome to episode 3 of our holiday series for 2021 on the leadership questions you should be asking of leadership candidates for potential job openings. I know we're doing a lot of hiring right now. A lot of organizations are facing some serious talent shortages, and that's not in just line level work, that is in leadership roles as well. And so for all of the episodes, Mondays and Thursdays between 2 weeks ago and the end of the year, we're going to be talking about these questions. On the first 2 episodes, we talked about how to build and maintain trust with your team, and then what steps will you take to learn about your team. On this episode, the question that I want to talk about that I think has some maybe some contention to it, and I've heard it in some of my interviews that I've been in. I've heard it asked in some interviews, and depending on how it's asked, it may go well or it may not go well. The question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses as a leader? And so when I hear this question, I immediately think of the old trope of, what is your biggest weakness? Oh, I'm a perfectionist. It's like finding a way of transferring the weakness into a strength, because you don't want to say you have any weaknesses. But I'm curious about this. Do you think you can find out anything about a candidate by asking them what their strengths and weaknesses are, or is there a way to answer it or a way to ask it that might be useful?
What you can find out from the candidate is if they've prepared for the interview
when
you ask that question.
Yes. How good are you at interviewing?
Exactly. That's really what we're talking about here. Yes. I think there are so many other ways, in my opinion, to ask that question that actually gives you what you're looking for. Which, what's the question behind the question is a lot of kind of what we're talking about. Like, is somebody self-aware? Does somebody have a clear understanding of where they're at in their professional development? Does somebody, clearly understand what they leverage to find success in a leadership role? And then they also understand like what it is that they're working through, or what are the things that could be potentially like blind spots for them. So there's definitely great value from understanding the real answers to those questions. But I agree with you that I think over time, because, I always tell people that there's really only 5 questions that people ask, when it comes to interviews.
Sure.
That's
they
kind
ask
of
them
one
100
of them.
different ways each. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a variation of that one. That yes, if somebody is really excited to talk about it, then that just shows me that they've done a good job preparing themselves for the interview.
I agree with that. I think, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, of course. Everybody has things that they're naturally better at than others. And I think why people are hesitant to answer this question honestly is rooted in something we've talked about on here before, which is this the tendency of a lot of companies to look for these unicorns, right? So you have these a job description of a role that you need to fill, and you kind of throw everything at it as far as like what would make you a good person to fill this role, and it puts out 10 different qualifications. And if I'm an applicant and I'm looking at it and I have confidence, I might say, "Ooh, I have 2 of those. Let me apply." That might not be enough. But there might be other people out there who said, "Ooh, I have 9 of the 10. Shoot, I guess it's not for me," and then they move on, which is obviously also the wrong way to do things. And so that's what it comes down to: is if you think that your weaknesses, whatever they are going to be they're going to be like the deal breakers of you being able to move forward with an application, then you are likely to answer this question in a way that is disingenuous or that doesn't really answer the question, or as you put it, just be prepared to interview it in a way that, or to answer it in a way that doesn't really show your cards. But I think when it comes to leaders, because everybody has things that they are I don't necessarily weak on, but that things that have to be very intentional with. And to me, that's what I think about when I think of weaknesses, strengths, and weaknesses. Strengths to me are they're almost muscle memory. They're a part of who I am to my core, where it's the way my personality works. They just naturally come out. I don't have to try at all. It's just part of it. Weaknesses to me aren't necessarily things that I can't do. They're just things that have to be very intentional on doing, and that doesn't mean that I can't do them. But I think if you're going to ask somebody a question about this and they talk about this in a way that is meaningful, what I want to hear from a candidate is the thing that they have to be intentional on, and then an example of where they were intentional on it. So they know this about themselves. They know that this is a potential blind spot for them, and because of that, these are the steps they've taken to make sure that the blind spots don't turn into accidents. And because of those steps they've taken, this is how they can show it in practice. I know that this is something that I have struggled with in the past, and now I am trying to be very intentional about doing these things. And when I say intentional, I mean almost like scheduled actions to make sure that you're not allowing this to kind of bite you later on when you wouldn't have to do that on something that you are very good at. And so, Lorenzo, what I want to ask you is, do you have any of those yourselves? Do you have something that you have to be very intentional on doing? Because if you don't, it will end up biting you, because it's not necessarily a weakness, but it's just something that you, without the work, that it won't just come naturally. And so before you answer that, I want to give it up to a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, what is something you have to be very intentional on doing in order to make sure that it doesn't come off as a weakness? But if someone didn't know you were intentionally doing it, they might think it was not a weakness.
Yeah, well, I think it's as a leader of leaders, one of the things that I kind of hang my hat on is just around like empowerment and allowing people the space to kind of learn and grow. And I feel over time that I'm really great at kind of assessing where somebody needs this help and support. So like when you think about like maybe the situational leadership model of really being able to realize like they say that they've got it, but really they need some really high levels of direction right now, because maybe whatever the reason is that they're not comfortable saying that they're not exactly sure, or it's kind of the whole like, no, I totally get it, understand, message, clear, crystal clear, I'll go ahead and get this done. And then you have this feeling like they're going to walk away and be like, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to try anyway. I think over time that I've really sharpened that capability within myself to understand that when I'm working with leaders or other team members, I think the blind spot or the opportunity for me is assuming that when leaders tell me they understand that and they're capable of doing that, allowing them the space to go do that. And then the outcome from the other person that they're maybe leading does not have the same level of confidence or empowerment or clarity that's needed to be able to get the job done. Like a lot of times, we talked about this in the podcast before, people will emulate their leaders quite often. And so if my approach is kind of that, it's empowering, I trust you to go do it, I'm here if you need me, but I also expect you to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's a part of learning. If I have another leader that is approaching that with the same language, but not the same maybe intuition or observational skills to be able to adjust in the moment, that can leave somebody out there feeling like they said all these things, like they said that I can go do it. They said that they expect me to make mistakes. That doesn't feel very good, right? They said that that it'll be all mine and I'm going to have to own it. That feels like maybe they're delegating to me. So again, like there's so much underneath that it's one of the things that as a leader I have to be very conscious of, is that my leaders will emulate what I do without necessarily maybe the same approach or experience or capability to pivot and provide somebody with the support that they actually need. And so for me, it's a long answer, but it's something that I'm very, very conscious of. I also think the other part of it is my natural ability to connect with people and have a certain level of kind of connection and humor and dialogue that I can have with somebody very, very quickly, based upon myself being a natural connector. Where again, if other leaders try to emulate that same type of behavior, it cannot go over well, or it won't feel genuine or authentic when they attempt to do that. So I have to be conscious as well of like making sure my leaders are showing up as themselves and not necessarily trying to emulate me in a way that is coming across again to their people is just not genuine.
Right. I think for me, the natural strength of mine would be that I can let things go really, really quickly. When it comes to, we always talk about if you're delivering kind of a constructive performance feedback on an employee, once the conversation is done, it's out of my mind. When I say to an employee, hey, just so you know, this doesn't hurt our relationship. I don't think any less of you. It's something that this is a formality, but I have full confidence that you're going to pull this out and you're going to get better. And the things that you say you're going to do to change things, that you mean it. I really mean that when I say that to an employee, and I don't think about it again when I leave the room. And where I have to be really intentional on is understanding that not everybody else is that way. That person that I just had the conversation with, they might dwell on it for days or weeks or even months and take it much more personally and much more to heart. And so I think that if I'm not very intentional on making sure that the relationship is still strong, I can't just assume that people are able to let go of something just because I was able to let go of it. And I have worked on that a lot in my career. And when I talk about it if I'm interviewing for something, I talk about it in that regard, and in the times where it has been a pitfall of mine, and then also examples of when I have been cognizant of it, and then I've taken steps to make it better, and then therefore it has worked out well for me. But it doesn't mean that I'm good at it. It's like if you look at someone says that they're an alcoholic and they've been sober for 35 years, then the natural inclination is to say, well, then you haven't had a drink in 35 years, you're no longer an alcoholic. It's like no. The alcoholics know that that's who they are forever. And the fact that they haven't had a drink in 35 years, it just means that they are an alcoholic who hasn't had a drink in 35 years, and they're doing really, really well with it. This will be something that I have to focus on for the rest of my career. I know that about myself. And so, it doesn't mean that 20 years from now, when it's not biting me at all anymore, it doesn't mean that I no longer have that weakness. It just means that I've gotten really good at compensating for it and being cognizant of what that weakness is. And I think that's where you find out a lot about leadership candidates, is in how have they taken steps to mitigate the damage caused by the weaknesses while understanding that they're never going to go away, and owning them as a part of who they are, instead of trying to kind of say that it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the level of detail, and these sound like really, really long answers, but the reality is I think that a big part of leadership is that element of self-reflection and understanding, and realizing could I say the real answer is it's because I'm a perfectionist, Chris, who cares too much about my business sometimes.
Right.
No, stop. Right. You have to. It's got to be deeper than that. It has to be deeper to understanding of there are things that again that you will view as even strengths. I feel that a lot of my strengths are able to kind of lead people in this empowering way. That allows them to own something and to make mistakes and to learn from them and to grow from them. But I also know that style of leadership can create waves when it comes to other leaders trying to emulate that or do the same type of thing in a space where they're not as comfortable, or they're not as skilled, or they're not as experienced leading that type of way. So I have to be very conscious of that as a leader of leaders, to make sure that it's not happening for a larger team. But that's I think that's what you really want to hear from people, is have they sat back and really considered not like you said earlier, the weakness as something they can't do, but have they considered the impact they can have in a non-intentional negative way by being maybe very strong or very focused in a certain style of leadership or the way they're showing up for their people.
Right. Because at the end of the day, a weakness isn't necessarily defined by an individual person. That's just subjective. A weakness can only be objectively defined by whatever the outcome is from it. So you look at the net outcome of everything associated with the way somebody does something. If it's good for all people involved and the business, it's really hard to call that a weakness. But as soon as you can say that there is some collateral damage, that there's some kind of ripple effect where this might turn out well, but it's going to cause problems here, I think by definition that could be classified as a weakness. But you have to know it. You have to know that that's what's happening. And if you are obtuse to that, and you just think that because it's a strength of yours that it doesn't have a ripple effect, and that you can just say, well, that's not my weakness, it's their weakness, that they can't be at the same level that I'm at. You can't do that as a leader. As a leader, every action that you have has a recourse to it. And if a person who you have taken on as their leader, and you say that it's my responsibility to develop you and grow you, you can't just dismiss that on them. It has to be something that you own the outcome of, even if what you're doing is well-intentioned and well-executed.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. Real quick shout-out to a few people that we've been texting with in our community chat. Alan, Alex, Stacy, Rachel, Shree, Thank you so much for the text messages, and I hope many of you have enjoyed some free books. And looking forward to talking to a lot more of you. So we will end the episode here. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.